How's it going, everyone? Alex here with Jeeps Limited. Today I'm doing a nut and bolt check on my Jeep, getting ready for a trip we got coming up here in a couple of weeks. I'm doing a bit more of an in-depth nut and bolt check than I normally do, and the reason why is one, it's just important to do, and two, I'm actually going to be driving the Jeep this time. It's a probably almost 350 miles round trip of highway driving. I have not driven this that far since I don't know, May, April when I blew the motor. So I want to just make sure that I cross my T's, dot my I's, make sure everything is tight, good to go, greased up. So I'm just going to kind of show you guys some of the stuff I look for and kind of some of the stuff I found that, I'm glad I saw that needs to be corrected. All right, so one big reason why it's important to be doing nut and bolt checks and while you're doing that, checking your steering is because this jam nut on my tie rod, not even close to tight. So that's kind of the stuff we want to check for, especially on the steering. All right, so after tightening and checking these jam nuts on my tie rod and drag link to make sure they're tight and retightening them, one thing I like to do is I put these paint marks on here. And the reason why I do that, now that they're tight, put the paint mark on there. Next time, or even when I'm out on the trail driving, whatever, stopped at a gas station, I can glance at that and see that they're tight. I can tell that they didn't move because the paint lines up. If you look at it and it's off, then you know, okay, hey, I need to tighten this before I continue on. So that just kind of makes it a little bit easier on future nut and bolt checks and just at a quick glance if you're driving anywhere to make sure that this stuff is still tight like it's supposed to be. So I put that on a lot of nuts and bolts, just on a lot of suspension and steering components, just kind of makes life a little bit easier. So, and that's just a little tip I have. So under the Jeep here, a lot of the stuff we're going to look at, I try and look at as much as I can. Control arms, jam nuts on the control arms, brake components, shocks, drive shafts I try to look at a lot, depending on what kind of drive shafts you have. If you got these strap style, I've actually had them come a little bit loose. You don't want to over tighten them and crush the U-joint caps, but I have had them come a little bit loose. So that's something you always want to check as well. But yeah, I just check about everything that I can. You know, you never know. It doesn't hurt. Spend a little bit of time. I mean, you could do this quickly in 20 minutes if you wanted to. Or, again, if you want to spend a little bit more time, you can spend a little bit more time on it. Another thing I like to look at, and anything with like a castle nut, so on your steering or your ball joints, just make sure the cotter pins are still in there. The cotter pin's in there, then you know it, one, it didn't come loose, and two, it's not gonna come loose if that cotter pin is still in there. So that's, again, another thing. You just look at it and go, okay, good to go. So it can be pretty quick and easy, really. Another thing I found loose is the front differential drain plug. I happened to just look at it and saw that it was wet around it, so I put a wrench on it, and it was also pretty loose. That's another kind of thing you want to try and keep an eye on, is drain plugs, fill plugs, stuff like that. If that's going to be backing its way out and actually become loose and you're going to start losing your fluid, it's going to cost you an axle pretty quickly. So another area we're going to make sure that we pay close attention to is an area where we've recently done some work. I recently replaced this axle U-joint. So I want to, one, double check that axle U-joint, make sure it still looks good, make sure it's not coming unseated, make sure there's nothing stupid going on with that. And then also, we're just going to be checking all the bolts in this area on the hubs, the brakes, and everything, because these were recently taken off. So you just want to make sure you're double checking and checking your own work. Just make sure you did it right. You know, you never know. Sometimes you need to retorque things, especially if you install new suspension components and stuff like that. You actually want to make sure you retorque everything after 100 miles or so, because the stuff really does tend to come loose. So double check areas where you've recently been working on. So over here on my lower front control arms, you can see the existing paint marks that I put on there on the jam nuts previously. Since they haven't moved since whenever I checked them and put that mark on there, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that that's good. It's not loose. It hasn't moved. So that's kind of why I'm putting the paint marks on there. Just makes it a little bit quicker and easier as you're going along. Take a quick glance at it. Okay, the paint lines still line up, so it hasn't moved, so you're good to go. All right, so in the back of the Jeep here, you're kind of looking at the same things. Obviously, just less the steering. You have a track bar, just make sure that's tight. I go through, I mean, I even make sure that my shocks are tight. Sway bars, anything that I've personally touched, which in my case is everything, I like to just double check, make sure it's all still tight. You'd be surprised how easily things come loose. So there's really nothing interesting to see back here. Everything was tight, so that's pretty much it. I mean, this really just doesn't take that long. I have a creeper, and I just use it to roll under the Jeep, look at things, push, pull, check nuts and bolts. So that's all we have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching.